Hello everyone, back at it again in my little yellow kayak. I just launched the kayak and I'm going to start fishing right away. Fishing with Berkley Choppo 120 in the live bluegill color. And these are perfect conditions as far as I'm concerned. I know it doesn't look too windy on camera, but it's pretty windy. We've got clouds, overcast skies, some rainstorms coming through. Actually, I fished here because it's a little less windy here than some other parts near me, and I was hoping to outflank some rainstorms coming through. It ended up working out pretty well. You can see I don't have my rain gear on, so kind of taking a chance here. But these are the kinds of conditions that you don't want to sleep in and miss. And nobody else is out here because most people, they look at the weather outside and they see the trees blowing, etc. I just missed one near the boat. And they say, I'll go fishing when it's sunny out. No, 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 no. You want to go fishing when it's overcast, when it's blowing. And these are the kinds of things that get the fish fired up. If it's at all fishable, I've only got a 10-foot kayak here, and I have to pick my days and pick my spots. I'm not going to be able to go out on a big giant lake in this little boat, but a little pond like this with some wind. We're not at the white cap stage yet, and it's fine. And the fish are fired up. I got my first fish coming in. Looks like a bass. That's the target species for today. I was hoping with the little bit bigger Choppo, I might get into some bigger bass, but yeah, they're kind of all the same size. This one's giving me a hard time. He's still pretty green. Once I get those lip grippers on him, I can handle him a little bit better. And I thought to bring pliers along with me this time too. I've got a swim bait with me and a whopper plopper 110 in case they start slowing down later in the morning. But these fish were pretty much fired up from the get-go. And I've managed to hook the thigh braces on my kayak. That's alright. We'll get back to fishing it in just a minute. So I was out here a few days ago and in the same kinds of conditions, although it's a little bit windier today, not quite as rainy. And I was wishing I had brought a Choppo with me, and all I had was a whopper plopper 110, which was fine. It got the job done, but I was thinking a bigger profile and a little bit more sound might get me a few bigger fish. And I just wanted to try it. And it worked out all right. These bass seem to like the Choppo. A little bit later on, I threw the whopper plopper 110 when the bite slowed down, and I got some more fish, but they seem to be a little bit smaller overall. That one just threw the hooks, which is easy for me. Gone. See ya. I think the next fish came on my very next cast. The whopper plopper 110 or 130 or the Choppo 120 or 105, they all cast really well, and part of the game here, the water's pretty clear and shallow, is trying to get that bait as far away from me as possible because the fish see me and they spook off and swim away and they won't bite. So I want to be a little bit stealthy, which is a lot easier with the clouds and the wind. That one got completely out of the water. Anyway, the further you can get that bait away from the boat, the better. And I got another one on the Choppo 120. Some people have a strong preference for one over the other. I mean, the whopper plopper or the Choppo. To me, I think the Choppo's better in windier conditions, choppier conditions, and that's because it has a hard plastic tail and it slaps the water a little bit harder, makes just a little bit more noise, a little bit more ruckus. And the whopper plopper has a soft tail and it's just a little bit more subtle. I mean, they're both fairly noisy baits, especially in the larger sizes, but that's how I sort of think about it. If I want something as loud and obnoxious as possible, I'll usually go with the Choppo 120, and then a step down from that would be the whopper plopper 130, and then you can kind of alternate back and forth until you find the right size, the right profile. Maybe they're on a certain size bait, or maybe there are certain fish of a certain caliber in the lake you're fishing, and you want to try to get the biggest bite you can. Definitely start with the bigger size whopper plopper and the bigger size choppo. Sometimes the fish can get really specific about bait size, especially if they're on, like 3 or 4 inch herring. You're probably better off with the 110 size than some of the bigger sizes. But a lot of the times I'm just reacting to the weather conditions more so than the bait. So if there's a lot of chop on the water, I'm going bigger, bolder, and generally leaning towards the choppo. So an easy way to remember it is Berkley Choppo for choppy conditions. It's got the chop right in there in the name, so it's easy to remember. So I caught a bunch of fish on the Berkley Choppo 120 in fairly short order, and I decided since they were cooperating so nicely, I'd pull out the big guns. That's a 6-inch FishLab Bio Swimbait. In the swimbait world, this is a very reasonably priced swimbait, and I think the pattern looks a lot like a herring, but I think the pattern is actually called shad. They've got a few other colors. I think they have a golden shiner color, but to me it looks a lot like the old Strike King wake baits, and they also had king wake. Problem with those Strike King baits though is they had a plastic hinge with a pin down the middle of it, and it was kind of easy for that plastic rear piece, the hinge, to fail, and then you lose the back end of the bait. Hopefully not with a fish attached to the other end. But the hinge mechanism on the FishLab seems to be a lot more durable, and I like it, and the fish seem to like it too. But it's like a beefed up version of the old Strike King wake shad, or maybe the king wake. So these are the kinds of conditions that I like to throw a swimbait in. I got some clouds, I got some wind, got some storms rolling in later, and I just feel like I have better odds of hooking something big. In every single cast I've got a chance at a 5 or 6 or 7 pounder. But it's surprising how many small fish go after a big bait like this. I mean, it's not a giant bait, it's 6 inches, but it's kind of thick, and it would be a meal for a small bass like this, and they still go after it like it owes them money or something. It's incredible to me. So if you're worried about throwing bigger baits and you think you're just not going to get any bites, I think a lot of it has to do with the conditions and how charged up the fish are. And you can sort of gauge that with other baits like a whopper plopper or a choppo, or just some other cast and retrieve bait that gives you an idea of the activity level of the fish, and then go from there. The other thing I was doing, I don't know if you just saw it there, but I would cast out the bait and let it land and smack down, and then I'd give it 2 twitches, and you can almost get this bait to walk in place, and it goes left, right, and then I start a slow and steady retrieve. And I felt like I could call fish over to the splashdown a little bit better, get some fish over to investigate, and then maybe they'd hit it on the retrieve. And it ended up working out a few times. So it seemed like the bite slowed down a little bit. Maybe the skies were getting a little bit brighter. It's a little bit later in the morning, and I decided I'd drop down to a 110 whopper plopper in the bluegill color, the new bluegill color I think it's called. And I was fishing it with a stop and go retrieve, which is usually pretty good for bass, and pickerel tend to go for the faster retrieves. Well, it didn't work out in this case, and I got a giant pickerel. He almost didn't fit in the net. It's kind of flopping there. Hopefully the tail doesn't come out. If the tail comes out, then I'm in trouble. And he got that whole bait into his mouth. He's big enough I could fit my whole fist into his mouth. I'm not going to do it because I'd probably lose some skin and blood in the process, but That was a big toothy critter. So I have to get my long handled forceps and very carefully extract that whopper plopper from that toothy mouth there. He got all of it too. The first thing I'm going to try to do is get most of the bait outside of the toothy parts, both for his benefit and mine. And the bait seems to keep wanting to go in. Finally I got him free, and there he is. He didn't want to stay too long for pictures or video, so I just let him go on his way. After that pickerel, I had to retie my whopper plopper, and I just decided to try something else. I picked up a 6 cent speed wake. Now this is another bait that's a lot like the old Strike King wake shad, but they have it in some better colors, I'd say. I've got this one in a bluegillzilla, something like that color. It looks kind of like a bluegill, and there's a lot of bluegill beds around. I thought I'd give it a try. It's a shallow runner, so it doesn't dive into the weeds and get all fouled up. And you can really reel it pretty fast without it blowing out, hence the name speed wake. But to me, it's very, very similar to the old Strike King wake shad. So I caught a couple fish on the 6 cent speed wake in that bluegillzilla color, and I caught a few more on the whopper plopper 110, but nothing of any size. And I decided I'd go back to the FishLab Bio swim bait to see if I could get anything with a little bit more size. And it was working, but I don't know if the size was much better. He's not a bad one though. They seem to really like this bait. I think they think it's a herring. I wish this bait came in a bluegill color. There's a bunch of bluegill beds around here. It's just a little guy. But they're all fun. Every time I get a blow up on that swim bait, I think it's going to be a big fish. Oh, you can see the bluegill beds, top middle of the screen. The water's pretty clear and shallow. See how I started twitching that bait before I started reeling in? Yeah, so I was fishing around these spawning bluegill beds for a while, trying to pick off bass that were hanging around the bluegill. And I got a couple, but nothing of any huge size. So the star of today's trip was probably that FishLab Bio swim bait. It's a very inexpensive swim bait for what it is, and it gets bit. I like it. It reminds me a lot of maxed out Strike King wake shad, and it's just better built, better quality. So you're paying a little bit more for the quality of the construction, but on the plus side, it shouldn't fall apart, and that's a pretty key thing. The Choppo is pretty good in the morning, the 120 bluegill colored Choppo. And I caught a few more fish on a 6 cents speed wake and the 110 whopper plopper in the new bluegill color. So a pretty good morning overall. I had fun out here in the wind, and I didn't get rained on too much, which was a bonus. So thank you all for watching. If you made it this far, I really appreciate it. Just like all my other videos, I'll put all the gear, lures, line, rods, reels, colors, etc. in the video description, so you can duplicate what I was doing out here this morning in your own home lakes and hopefully have some good success there too. I'll catch you on the next one. See ya!